The web was initially made with purely functional needs in mind, a way to easily share documents between a known set of people and organizations. However, all these years on from initial conception, the uses for the web and the breadth of people who use it has rapidly expanded and exploded. The information superhighway is in full use, and it has grown vastly in the offerings it gives developers to create weird and wonderful things all across the globe. Back in the day, as the web came into its stride of relevancy, pages were dominated by these horrific sweeping gradients that were plastered everywhere and anywhere they could be. Over the years, the dev and design communities have collectively pulled their socks up and moved on to flatter, simpler design. Granted, this was mostly down to iOS 7 releasing with this new flat aesthetic that has changed technical graphic design ever since. But what if I was to say to you that gradients, they're so back, but they're back in a more tasteful way. As well as gradients, 3D elements are also making a return. But this time on the web, we've got a whole bunch of tools and features that make it more possible than ever. If you want to bring actual, real 3D elements to the web, there are new JavaScript specifications that leverage WebGL that allow you to do this. There are also some great frameworks as well that help reduce all the boilerplate needed so that you can just crack on and make cool experiences. Okay, so let's cut to the chase. ClearScore has this beautiful looking 3D element that is directly on the app's landing page. It works across all browsers and devices, also with trackpad gestures, the mouse, and it looks 3D. But how does this work? Well, so it's not 3D. Well, it is as it looks 3D, but it's actually just a bunch of 2D elements stacked up in a clever way to sell you the illusion that it's 3D. In classic fashion for me, I've been nerd sniped by an obscure thing I've seen online, and I just have to recreate this snippet to show how it can be done. As always, we're going to start by booting up CodePen. While this might seem like a fairly complex component, it's actually quite simple once we've broken it down. We'll start by creating a container element and adding in some pages. We'll throw a couple of styles in as well that stops these from overflowing and gives us a nice scrolling box. We can also clamp the border radius into a circle while we're here. A key feature of this is that it stops on each slide as you scroll through. While we could handle all this interaction in JavaScript, that would mean we would have to handle a ton of different situations and interactions depending on the mouse, touch, and more. We can skirt around all of this by using a couple of nifty CSS scroll snap properties. We can tell our box here that we want to have a snapping behavior when scrolling only on the x-axis. We also just need to tell each page that we want to stop in the middle of their content, as well as making it so we always stop on each slide. Without a scroll snap always, users can sometimes fling past the slide if they're scrolling quickly. While this could be considered a feature in some situations, we want to limit it to one page at a time. We also want this to look a little bit more seamless, so we'll turn off the scroll bar at the bottom. One big issue with this, however, is that gestures work great for touch devices and trackpad users, but if you've got a mouse, it won't work. What we'll do is we'll add a small amount of JavaScript that just allows you to drag across on pages on desktop. We'll also add in some CSS so that when you hover over it, you get this little grabbing icon, and when you click down, it grabs as you spin it around. To be honest, this is a really nice 2D pager component that could be finished here if that was our goal, but we've come here to make it 3D, so let's do that. Looking back at ClearScore, we can deduce some variables that we'll need in order to achieve this effect. We need to know its size, thickness, and the amount of blur we want to apply to the background. We're also going to need some other mathsy variables, but we can come back to those later. In order to rotate our page around the center, we need to position them in the absolute middle of our container. This will break our paging, so we'll quickly add in a function that runs on load. It will just count our pages and put in some placeholders that will keep space for each element. We'll also add in a listener that gets fired when a scroll event does happen. We can use this alongside a smidge of maths that just takes our current left position and divides it by the container size. This will give us a value between 0 and 1, which we can use to determine how far around the rotation we are. While we're here, we'll also calculate the index of the slide we're on. We can turn off any pages that shouldn't be shown, and only the front-facing slide is visible to users. One of the final pieces to this puzzle is now to use this rotation variable we've got access to. CSS Transforms are additive, which means they take place one after another. This is great as it means we can first rotate our slide by the angle we want it to face, and then we can move it out towards the camera to get a 3D looking effect. While we might have got our faces moving around, this isn't quite the 3D effect we're going for. The icing on the cake is this background and edge that looks to move as the coin rotates around. If we crudely use the rotation multiplied by the width, you might be able to see where I'm going with this, but it doesn't really line up correctly. I'm not smart enough, and nor do I claim to know what kind of mathematical function is needed to get this width value. Back in the day, I would have regrettably posted on Stack Overflow to be berated with why this is a skill issue and I should give up entirely. But luckily for us, I can skip the mental turmoil by instead asking our fellas over in the AI world. After a little back and forth trying to explain myself eloquently enough, they know exactly what I'm talking about and have provided me with this lovely little snippet I can use to calculate a bunch of different properties we need. Also, before anyone roasts me, I don't actually know what theta means, nor if this is even accurate or makes sense. However, I know this snippet will work in the situation we've got, and that's good enough for me. Pasting this into our code and then using it for our width and border radius, you can see we're nearly there. When we then overlay our pages, it looks close enough to trick your eye to thinking it's actually 3D when it's not. Let's also add some extra pizzazz to sell the effect. by adding in a shine that moves over as our page rotates. This just makes it feel a little bit more 3D and should hopefully tie in any content we place into these slides, and the whole effect just gets sold a little bit more. And that's it. I've now got this great looking element that looks 3D without using any real 3D elements, models, or effects. As we're using CSS variables, we can also easily add in an animation that makes it spin around forever, enticing users to interact with it. Lastly, if you see anything cool out there in the digital world, then please comment it down below, and I'll see if I can recreate it in an upcoming video.